This is Ronnie. He was helping with chores
Around the house and then made some medicine for his grandma. Then a teacher and a guy showed up, offering free housing and schooling for Ronnie. But his folks turned it down, saying they'd had it with their current life. The teacher and the guy left, so Ronnie got ready for school and said bye to his grandma. Ronnie's folks were actually loaded. You could tell because they drove a fancy car wherever they went. His grandma saw Ronnie as soon as he left the house and told other people who seemed to be keeping an eye on him. It turns out she was not really his grandma, but instead, she worked for Ronnie's dad. As Ronnie was leaving, he ran into a tourist who asked in English where the post office was. He was able to help the tourist in English, which was actually a sneaky plan by his parents to get him to learn the language. When Ronnie came home from school, his grandparents from his mother were there with some fancy presents, but they got chased away by people his parents hired. His parents told his grandparents not to give him gifts because they didn't want it to spoil him. On his way home, Ronnie ran into his friend in a car and teased him about not having much money. Ronnie didn't say anything back. A few years ago, Ronnie's parents went to an old, beat-up apartment where his father used to live. They wanted to build a house there to educate Ronnie and avoid spoiling him with wealth. At first, Ronnie's mom was on board with the plan, but then she completely disagreed with her husband after he said they should pretend to be poor too. Back to the present. At Ronnie's birthday party, his family was celebrating. When it was time to cut the cake, his grandma almost spilled the beans about something, but thankfully, Ronnie's dad stopped her. As his grandparents were getting ready to leave, his grandpa tried to give him some cash, but because of his parents' teachings, Ronnie ended up giving the money to his dad for household expenses. In return, his dad handed over his savings and said it was time for Ronnie to start handling the family finances. That night, everyone in the family chilled out and read books. After finishing his book, Ronnie's dad fixed the leaking roof. Ronnie noticed that his dad's shoes were getting old and worn out. When he said goodnight and mentioned that he'd save up to buy his dad new shoes, it made his dad really proud and happy. Ronnie's folks were spotted heading into their hidden hideout, using a secret elevator hidden in a closet. A bunch of folks from the neighborhood were there too, all of them being employed by Ronnie's parents. The next day, Ronnie headed to the market to grab some veggies. The veggie seller spoke English, but Ronnie managed just fine. While he was there, he also popped into a cell phone shop, and the owner said he could check things out. After that, he swung by the shoe store to browse for some adult kicks. After Ronnie went shopping, he gave his stuff to his mom. That was when his mom caught him trying to hide a box and thought he had purchased new shoes. In the kitchen, Ronnie's mom gave the ingredients Ron brought from the market, and the chef made the dish in the secret kitchen. She mentioned that Ronnie got his dad some new shoes, but later found out he actually bought a tablet. She also caught him sneaking off to play with the tablet in the bathroom. The next day, Ronnie's dad said bye because he had to go to work for a few days. His dad asked him to look out for his mom and grandma since he was the only guy in the house. When they were hugging, Ronnie noticed that his dad's shoes were even more worn out. Ronnie felt super bad because he spent his money on a new tablet. Instead of getting his dad some new shoes, Ronnie was going to sell his tablet to get his money back. But when he tried to sell it, he saw that it was busted. The seller didn't want it back, and Ronnie went home crying. On his way home, Ronnie spotted a restaurant offering free snacks to people waiting in line, so he thought it would be nice to bring his mom and grandma. He grabbed a bunch of snacks for them at the restaurant, but they were totally mortified and had to leave right away. His mom explained that his grandma wasn't feeling well. That night, Grandma told Ronnie to be an awesome dude when he grew up. Then, she faked coughing up blood to make her illness seem more serious. The next day, Ronnie was out collecting old bottles and cans when his school friends showed up and started picking on him. Ronnie's mom saw it on the security camera and got super mad because she couldn't do anything to stop it. Her husband said it was just part of Ronnie's journey to becoming an awesome person. It was revealed that the tablet Ronnie was going to sell was messed up on purpose by his parents to teach him a lesson. He also had a chance to steal that day, but he decided to be a good person and not do it. One of Ronnie's parents' employees couldn't bear seeing Ronnie picking up trash, so he left some used bottles near the trash can on purpose. When Ronnie came to collect the bottles, a stranger who spoke English talked to him. At first, Ronnie's parents' people thought the person was one of them who was supposed to speak English with Ronnie. The stranger then invited Ronnie to eat at a fancy hotel and introduced him to someone who turned out to be his long-lost brother, Danny. Ronnie still had no idea that the person was actually his own brother. Later on, the folks who saw Ronnie told the grandma that he was with the English teacher. but she said there was no English teacher around that day. They freaked out and rushed after Ronnie to the hotel, where they found the foreigner and Danny with him. When the dad was going to take Ronnie, he realized that the long-haired guy was actually Danny and told him to keep quiet about being Ronnie's brother. When Ronnie got home, his mom asked him about the tablet he bought. His dad wasn't mad and tried to figure out how to get the money back. Ronnie suggested collecting and selling bottles and cans. His dad gave him a tip on where to find a bunch of them, which turned out to be a football stadium. They went there and found tons of bottles, but it turns out his dad had actually rented the whole stadium and filled it with bottles for that occasion. The next day, Ronnie ran to school and caught the eye of a running coach. Meanwhile, his dad was stoked about the new shoes Ronnie got for him. Shortly after, the coach met Ronnie's parents and said that he wanted Ronnie to join the National Olympics. Once Ronnie's father saw how excited Ronnie was, he agreed to let him start training. Ronnie's parents talked about the permission the dad had given. The dad said he couldn't bear to stop Ronnie at that time, but he promised to figure out a way to stop Ronnie from going to the National Olympics. Later, while Ronnie was sleeping, his dad put something on his feet that made them go numb, so he couldn't walk. Just then, Ronnie's grandma almost let it slip that she could actually walk when she gave her wheelchair to Ronnie. Ronnie got taken to a doctor who turned out to be his dad's employee too. The doc told Ronnie that he didn't stand a chance of making it to the Olympics. Ronnie couldn't hold back his sadness and cried. When they got back home, Ronnie's dad told him that even though he couldn't be a jock, there were still other ways to succeed, like finishing college. Ronnie agreed to give it a shot, so his dad promised to get him a bike so he wouldn't have to run everywhere anymore. A couple years later, Ronnie was looking all grown up as a good-looking high school kid. He had a buddy named Diane. After school one day, Diane bragged to Ronnie that she got into a top-notch school. Ronnie, clueless, asked her why she got in because he didn't think she had what it takes. Diane got mad, gave Ronnie a kick, and stormed off. When Ronnie got back home, the neighbor asked him to solve a math problem using a formula, and he did it easily. Then, as he was about to go inside, he overheard a conversation about his future college fees, which just made him more excited to study. The next day, the teacher in the class was being monitored to get promoted to vice headmaster. Everything was going fine in class until Ronnie asked a tough question that the teacher couldn't answer. That ended up costing the teacher the promotion, so he punished Ronnie by not letting him go to afternoon lessons. Ronnie decided to head home early. As he was walking, he unexpectedly spotted his grandma shooting hoops on the basketball court. Grandma freaked out when she saw him and quickly hightailed it out of there. When Ronnie got home, he was shocked to see his grandma there, even though he knew he'd seen her earlier and even had proof in the form of her shoes that she'd left behind when he tried to catch up with her. But she kept denying it, so he started asking around the house to see if anyone else had seen his grandma at home all day. Then he caught his mom coming out of her room, still decked out in her fancy jewelry, which just made everything even more confusing. Ronnie told his dad about it, but his dad just said maybe he was tired from studying too hard. Due to what happened earlier, Ronnie's dad went with Plan B and had Grandma stay at the secret headquarters. The next day, Ronnie found the house was empty. He noticed a photo of his grandmother on the wall. His dad told him that Grandma passed away last night from her illness. He then asked Ronnie to come to her funeral. At another location, everyone was getting ready for Grandma's fake funeral. Soon after, Ronnie showed up and everyone was all set. Ronnie got teary-eyed when he saw his grandma looking pale. He couldn't help but cry because he couldn't make her happy and buy her a big house. His words got to his grandma, and she started crying too. The most intense moment was when they were about to take the grandma out of the room. Ronnie started crying like crazy, and then his grandma started crying like crazy too. Luckily, Ronnie's mom stepped in and calmed things down before Ronnie realized that this was a setup. A couple days later, Ronnie ran into Diane. He told her about how he saw his grandma playing basketball before she passed away, and how his mom randomly showed up wearing fancy jewelry. Diane thought maybe Ronnie's mom was cheating with a wealthy guy. Ronnie's gut feeling got stronger when they had dinner together. He noticed his mom looking all clean and polished, like she was getting spa treatments every day, while his dad looked tired and worn out. One day, Diane called and said she saw Ronnie's mom leaving with some other guy, so he went over to the address she gave. Meanwhile, in that house, His parents and Danny were talking about how to deal with him. As soon as he knocked on the door, his mom freaked out, but they then explained that they worked for the owner of the house to cover up the truth while Danny was tied upstairs. Ronnie told his dad that the house seemed familiar, especially when he spotted a swimming pool. All of a sudden, Danny appeared from the stairs, all tied up. His dad quickly distracted Ronnie so he wouldn't notice Danny, but Danny came closer, and the dad ended up pushing both himself and Ronnie into the swimming pool, so Ronnie wouldn't be able to see Danny. Later that day, after they dried off and got changed, Ronnie told his dad he'd do his best to get into college. A couple days later, Ronnie was getting ready to take his college entrance exam, but his parents sensed something off about his attitude. Meanwhile, Danny was spotted picking up some gear and started working out like he was prepping for something big. Ronnie's folks got his university test results soon after, and they were super stoked because his score was almost perfect. They were really proud of him, especially since he was on the verge of getting into the university. The next day, Ronnie's parents took him to the university's final entrance exam. Once in the classroom, Ronnie started answering the exam questions. After the test ended, Ronnie's folks couldn't find him, so they went back to their headquarters. They were totally surprised to find Ronnie's bag with a pic of him with his mouth taped up. One of the staff thought it was the enemy of Ronnie's dad, but he didn't think he had any enemies. He figured it had to be Danny who did this. One of them then said he knew where the pic was taken, so they all rushed over there. Someone was spotted watching them from a high spot, and it turned out to be Ronnie. He remembered everything when he fell into the pool and saw a dove picture at the bottom. He also realized the neighbors had been spying on him and found an elevator to his parents' headquarters. He thought he was always being watched and decided to take the university entrance exam and stage a fake kidnapping. As everybody was out searching for him, he snuck into his parents' headquarters. That's when he discovered the crazy truth, that he had been under surveillance the whole time. And to top it off, all his neighbors were actually working for his parents, even his grandma. Then, out of nowhere, his grandma showed up and said sorry. After that, everyone went back to the headquarters and spilled the beans about what was really going on. Ronnie's dad said he did all that to have a child who was good at everything and suggested Ronnie try the entrance exam next year. Everyone encouraged him, but he didn't react. He just walked out, followed by everyone else. His dad tried talking to him along the way, but Ronnie stayed quiet. When they reached the exit, Ronnie smiled and said he just wanted to rely on his own abilities. Then he opened the gate and ran off. Meanwhile, Danny was seen climbing a mountain, explaining the reason behind all his training earlier. At the end of the movie, Ronnie was in a marathon, and then he spotted a bunch of empty bottles, so he stopped and gathered them all up